Hey everyone, welcome to episode 4 of our special Heroic Nonsense Retro series, where we take a look back in time at our collection of original Transformers and GI Joe toys and their boxes, or what's left of them from when I was a kid. This week's spotlight is none other than the self-proclaimed Emperor of Cobra, Serpentor, in all his glory. Serpentor was always front and center in my battles and displays from back in the day, hovering over his Cobra minions on his golden air chariot and leading his army to what he thought was certain victory against the Joes. I loved playing with this toy and still have fond memories till this day, so of course I had to get the very first classified iteration of Serpentor as well, which we'll look at together in this episode. Like all my toys, I'm always surprised at how well they held up since I did play with them so much, and Serpentor is no exception. He's still in excellent shape with his long flowing shiny green cape and amazingly detailed headdress, as is his air chariot, which has held up incredibly well after all these years, even having all of his stickers pretty much perfectly in place and unfrayed. All the parts of the chariot are still connected and in one piece, and to be honest, the whole thing looks and feels as good as it did almost 40 years ago. I still even have his snake, which I'm pretty proud of. In fact, I was pretty good at keeping track of all my Joe and Cobra pets. As for the box, well, the front still looks pretty damn good. You'll see this is actually a bilingual one with French on the package, so I guess in a way, a good collectible for that reason alone. I'd say about half of my toys from then were from Canada, while the other half were from the States. Unfortunately, I did cut out the file card, which I kept with all my original file cards, though I haven't been able to track them down in my house yet and fear they may be gone for good. Other than that, all the details are still there. Alright, so let's start off with the box, which like I said a moment ago is still in really good shape for my purposes. I'm definitely not keeping it for grading, but as a piece of my childhood, a great piece of art and a collectible in its own right, even if not perfect. This version had to use up a ton of real estate for the French translations, but still had all the key elements, including this great dynamic image of Serpentor flying through the air on his chariot, snake in tow. In this case, you can see that the name of this type of set was a Cobra command weapon. It included the Cobra Emperor with a patented swivel arm battle grip, and you have the nice old school logo right here on the bottom right. You also can see the updated digital outlining, which I believe they had just moved to for this series. As was typical for a Canadian product, one side panel had the French only information, while the other had the English. Same for the top and bottom panels, but without the front panel image of Serpentor flying through the air like the side panels had. The back had a ton of info, my favorite being the schematic type information of the air chariot, which they specifically called out and highlighted with lines to the corresponding sections. I'll add a still at the end so you can read all the details at your leisure. The air chariot itself was, how could I put this, enhanced slightly to give it this very regal golden look. The top right had a bit more detail in addition to the file card, basically explaining who this character was and what type of vehicle he commanded. And of course you have the Emperor himself showcasing his great design as well as his accessories, which included a snake and dagger, which I assume I have somewhere in my weapons collection. And there are my 2 flag points that I never used. Wonder if they're still redeemable. Now let's take a look at this awesome toy, starting with the figure and chariot combined. What a fun combo this was back in the day. A mini vehicle that was so incredibly unique with a character and figure design that was as equally special. What a masterpiece, evoking a mix of Roman and Egyptian cues that brought to life a set that GI Joe as a series hadn't seen anything like. It was a sleek vehicle, compact like a chariot, but imposing at the same time, which was able to carry its toy figure perfectly. Every angle was impressive and thought out. And best part was the figure was actually able to stick to it properly with one simple peg, as most vehicles were able to properly accommodate back then. So let's split these two up and we can explore the air chariot in a bit more detail, starting with his 2 chariot mounted lasers, which were movable. The snake's head was attached to the vehicle's handlebars, which could therefore move together left to right. There were a number of stickers, including the Cobra one on the stabilizer, which looked really nice. And a ton of detail from the back view as well, with all the flight gauges and molded design elements, including these multiple stabilizers. You can see how the handlebars moved here from the other side. And a nice added bit of playability factor, a rotor that could spin by rotating this connector underneath the vehicle to give it some realistic flight action. Although not real gold as the box image might imply, the color injected plastic was really well done and has held up all these years later with no real discoloration. And I absolutely love this side and front view of the Cobra with its flared hood, so sleek and well designed. As for Serpentor himself, what a crazy and unique character from a time where GI Joe started heading into the more sci-fi and fantastical elements. I mean, look at him. This was not your typical army or even Cobra soldier. So much detail on this figure using gold and a few different shades of green, punctuated by scales and other snake elements. And this design went all across the figure, not one part of him was left untouched. And just when you thought that was it, you turned him around and saw this fantastic cape made out of shimmering green material. Probably one of the best designed capes for G1 along with Dr. Mindbender's. As for his head, wow. Don't forget this was a 1/18 scaled figure and look how much they included. Pretty much a full head inside, wrapped up in the head of a snake with 4 fangs hanging off of it. How could you not love this figure as a kid, or even now? And we can't leave out his snake, which was actually really detailed for a small pet like this. Great dynamic shape, balanced well, and full detail for the head, which was raised and flaring its hood. Most definitely a great pet to add to your 1/18 scaled collection. So how did the Classified team do in the end? I'd say they were spot on, as can easily be seen here with the two versions created almost 40 years apart right next to each other. The designers really took all the major and minor cues from the original when designing the Classified version, which was arguably something they needed to do for such an iconic character and vehicle. Starting with the Chariot itself, everything from the original is there and enhanced, but not too much so that it becomes something entirely different. The air intakes are replicated accurately, the lasers are there and updated, and of course you get the incomparable body of the snake, poised on the body of the Chariot, ready to strike with a ton more intricate detail, which is just so perfect. I mean, look at the scales here, the added design elements, and the chest plates on the Classified figure, all admirably replicated and enhanced here. With the added bonus of having the snake mouth open to reveal a nozzle with the ability to spray poison, which the original didn't have, and man, what a perfect cobra head they created here. Honestly, look at these similarities. Everything is there, from the slope down wings to the stabilizer's shape and design to the lasers, and even to the stickers, which are all there. I mean, to be honest, when you have such a great design to start with, why play around with it? I'm truly glad they recognize the importance of that here. I love that even the back includes essentially the same details as the original, down to the vehicle gauges near the legs. You obviously have a few enhancements, but not really to the design itself. Even the handlebars are pretty much the same. And from the top you can see that rotor with a bit more coloring to it, but again, generally replicated perfectly. It even rotates like the original. As for Serpentor himself, I'd say that they pretty much did the same thing they did as for the Chariot. They took the original, upsized him, and added some highlights. Don't believe me? Well then let's start with his snake wrapped around his chest with the tails coming together to make that same symbol as on the original. Or how about the plates along the middle of his armor that then gives way to some scales. Yes, the head is a bit different, but Classified came with two versions, one of which could replicate the original more accurately. As my box is stored away nicely for the moment, with that extra head you'll just have to take my word for it, though here's a pic from Pulse. Although the color scheme is generally similar, I think Classified Serpentor seems a bit lighter because of his size. There's more room for the colors and different shades to be separated out from each other, but yeah, all the design elements are 100% there. The leg plating, knee guards, wraparound snake elements, belt, colors, and scales have all been faithfully reproduced here. It's actually quite amazing looking at them side by side to see how many design elements they actually share. The cape is probably the biggest difference after the head design, but I do like it. It's more realistic and made up of scales rather than a sparkly material. Both are great for the figure they support, though I'd be interested in seeing what they might do for the inevitable retro version one day. So overall, the Classified Serpentor figure is a very faithful update to the original, which is really nice for a figure of this stature, though I must say, I do like the snake head staff upgrade. A bit emotional seeing my original that I got as a kid with one I got for our kids so many years later next to each other. And just to lighten the mood back up again, the snake itself. A bit more coiled and accurately colored, with a beautiful pose and amazing detail, but again, a nice homage to the original little guy. So that's it for this week's retro special. I'm ending with a few shots of some of our other 1/18 scaled figures I recently brought out for various reviews, and a very special visit by the commander himself in his battle armor, which I just felt I wanted to share in this spotlight. I also added in these shots I promised of the packaging, which you can take a closer look at if you would like. Next week we'll start winding down for the holidays, so we can come back full steam with a ton of new Transformers and GI Joe figures and reviews, and even a ghostly review of sorts. From HasLab to Studio Series, Retro Lines to Classified. All here coming January 2025. Hope you enjoyed this week's Retro Spotlight of Serpentor, the Cobra Emperor. And remember, it's all such heroic nonsense in the end.